I've always been the boring one in my family. Spreadsheet boring. Let me read the paperwork boring. The kind of person who believes that if you stay calm and do things the right way, you can avoid most disasters. That's why, after my dad died, everyone looked at me to handle the house. The family place sat outside a small Midwestern town. 2-story farmhouse, peeling white paint, a barn that leaned like it was tired, and 40 acres of nothing my dad always called our retirement plan. I didn't argue with grief. I just showed up with contractor bags and a legal pad and a plan. My older brother, Mark, was there too. Mark has always been the emotional weather in the room. Sunny one minute, thunder the next. He paced the porch, chain-smoking, acting like the house itself was judging him. "I just want it done," he said, rubbing his face. "Sell it, split it. I've got bills." I nodded like I wasn't hearing the desperation in that last word. "We'll do it clean," I told him. "No surprises." I meant it. I believed it. Dad didn't keep things organized the way I would've. He kept them hidden, which I told myself was just old-school privacy. I opened drawers that smelled like cedar and mouse droppings. I found old receipts for tractor parts, church bulletins, and one envelope full of cash. $1, 200 in wrinkled 20s. Like he didn't trust banks. The house sounded hollow without him. Every footstep echoed. The air had that stale mix of dust, old coffee, and the faint sweetness of dried apples left in a bowl. In the back bedroom closet, behind winter coats, I found a metal lockbox. The key was taped to the underside of the top shelf, like Dad wanted it accessible but not obvious. Inside were documents. Not just the will and life insurance paperwork like I expected, but a thick folder stamped county recorder and another stamped confidential in red. Right on top was a map of our land, highlighted in yellow, and a note in Dad's handwriting. "Do not show Mark until it's settled." My stomach tightened. My calm, rational brain tried to turn it into something innocent. But money doesn't leave notes like that for innocent reasons. That night, Mark and I sat at the old kitchen table with a single lamp on. Rain tapped the window like nervous fingers. Mark drank from a beer can and watched me sort papers into neat piles like it could make the situation behave. I kept my voice steady. "There are land documents I didn't know about." Mark's eyes sharpened. "Like what? Timber? Oil?" "I don't know yet," I said, which was true, but it landed like a lie. He leaned forward. "Dad always promised me the land was my safety net. You know that, right?" I looked at him. I saw the tired lines around his eyes, the way his hands shook when he set the can down. I'd spent years telling myself Mark was irresponsible and I was responsible, and that was the whole story. "I'm just going to review everything," I said. "Then we talk." Mark snorted. "Yeah, you always review." He stood up abruptly, chair legs scraping the floor. "Don't screw me," he said quietly, like it was a confession. I waited until I heard his bedroom door shut before I opened the confidential folder. Part 4. The first twist wasn't dramatic. It was clinical. A notice of delinquent property taxes, 3 years' worth. Not huge at first glance until I saw penalties and interest. Then a tax lien certificate with a deadline circled in red. My throat went dry. Dad had always acted like the land was paid off and safe, the one thing nobody could take from us. Meanwhile, the county had been counting down to a tax sale. I flipped through more pages and found an address I didn't recognize. An office in a city 2 hours away, and the name of a third-party purchaser who'd already bought the lien. This wasn't "we forgot to pay." This was a system of avoidance. I ran numbers on a scrap of paper like that would calm me down. If the lien holder foreclosed, we could lose everything for a fraction of the land's value. I stared at the kitchen wallpaper, faded roses from the 90s, and felt my sense of control wobble for the first time. Dad didn't leave us an inheritance. He left a timer. In the morning, I called the county treasurer, introducing myself the way I do at work when something is wrong and I'm trying not to sound scared. "Yes," the woman said, flat and practiced. "Taxes are delinquent. The lien was sold last year. Redemption period ends in 90 days. 90 days, I repeated, like it would change if I said it. Mark overheard enough to storm into the kitchen. "What's that? What did she say?" I kept my tone measured. "We're behind on property taxes. We have to pay them to keep the land." Mark stared at me like I told him Dad had a second family. "That's impossible." "It's not," I said and slid the papers toward him. He read 2 lines and his face went red. "He told me it was fine. He told me." Mark slammed his palm on the table. The lamp shook. "This is your fault," he snapped, immediately searching for a target. "You're the paperwork guy. You're supposed to catch this stuff." The old dynamic, right on schedule. I stay calm, he explodes, and we pretend that's all there is. But then Mark said, softer, "I can't cover this." And I realized money wasn't just the problem. Money was going to decide who we became. I did what I always do. I tried to solve it alone. I called the lien holder's office. They were polite in the way people are polite when they have leverage. Yes, we could redeem. Yes, we could set up a payoff. No, they didn't have to accept a payment plan. "How much?" I asked. The number they gave me made my stomach drop. $28,600. We didn't have that sitting around. Not without gutting savings. Not without a loan. Mark definitely didn't. He was behind on child support, had maxed out credit cards, and was always between jobs in a way that never seemed temporary. I stared at my own bank app that night, the blue glow reflecting in the dark living room. My savings was supposed to be for my kids' college and emergencies. This felt like both. I told myself calmly, we'll pay it, keep the land, sell it later, and it'll all balance out. Then I found another document in the lockbox, an appraisal. And that's when the second twist hit. The appraisal wasn't for 40 acres of nothing. It was for mineral rights. I had to read it twice, then a third time slower. The county map had a new overlay showing a corridor and a parcel number. There were references to aggregate extraction, royalty percentages, and a company name I recognized from a billboard near the highway, a big construction supplier. Dad had been approached to lease the land for a gravel pit expansion. He'd signed something years ago. The appraisal estimated potential payouts depending on production. Not guaranteed, but enough that my hands started shaking. Mark found me at the kitchen table with the papers spread out like a crime scene. "What now?" he asked, already angry. I swallowed. "The land might be worth a lot more than we thought." His eyes lit up in a way that scared me. Not joy, hunger. "How much?" he demanded. "It depends," I said. "It's complicated." Mark laughed. Harsh. "Of course it is. Of course you get the complicated version." I shouldn't have said it, but I did. "Dad wrote not to show you until it's settled." Mark went very still. Then, quietly, "Why would he write that?" I didn't answer because the truth was, I was starting to understand why. We hired a local attorney, an older guy with a tie that looked like it had survived multiple divorces. He flipped through the documents and nodded slowly. "You've got a lien situation," he said, "but you also have an asset with potential. If those mineral rights are intact, you can negotiate." Mark leaned forward. "So we're rich?" The attorney didn't smile. "Not yet, and there's a catch." He tapped a page I hadn't fully processed. A memorandum of lease filed with the county. Dad had agreed to terms, but the contract included a clause about assignment and first right of refusal, which basically meant we couldn't just sell to whoever we wanted without involving the company. "Dad boxed you in," the attorney said, like he was commenting on a weather report. Mark's face twisted. "He wouldn't do that." I heard myself say, too calmly, "He did." Mark stared at the mineral rights map like it was an insult. "He knew," he muttered. "He knew and he still let the taxes lapse?" That question hung in the air, and my careful, controlled brain finally admitted what my gut had been whispering. The taxes didn't lapse by accident. Something happened to the money. The third twist came out of a filing cabinet in Dad's office. Behind old farm manuals, I found bank statements Dad printed and never threw away. He'd withdrawn cash steadily. $500 here, $800 there, always right after deposit dates. Social Security, a small pension, payments from somewhere else. Then I found a second set of statements for an account I didn't recognize. Not in Dad's name. It was in Mark's. I stared at the account number until the letters blurred. It had regular deposits labeled Royalty Advance. Small at first, then bigger, then nothing. My hands went cold. This meant Dad hadn't just been approached about the land. He'd gotten money already, advance payments, and he'd put them into an account in Mark's name, which should have been a gift, right? A father helping his struggling son. Except Mark had been telling everyone he was broke, begging for cash, dodging bills. I confronted him that night in the living room. He was on the couch, scrolling, jaw working like he was chewing something invisible. "Did you know there was an account in your name?" I asked. Mark didn't look up. "What account?" I put the statements on the coffee table. His eyes flicked down, and the color drained from his face so fast I felt dizzy. He swallowed. "Where did you get those?" "Answer me," I said, still trying to sound rational, like tone could prevent collapse. Mark's voice went small. "Dad said it was temporary. How much did you take?" I asked. Mark shut his eyes. "I didn't take. He gave it." Money always has two stories. The givers, the receivers, and both can be true. Mark admitted it in pieces, like ripping a bandage off one hair at a time. He said Dad set up the account because Mark's ex-wife had been garnishing anything in Mark's name. Dad thought this would protect the money until Mark got stable. "Dad wanted me to start over," Mark insisted, voice rising. "He believed in me." "What happened to it?" I asked. Mark ran a hand through his hair. His fingers trembled. "Life happened." That was his phrase for everything. Life, like a storm that just hits you, like choices aren't involved. Eventually, he said, "I had to pay stuff. Rent, car, debts, child support." I asked, sharp. Mark flinched. "Sometimes. And the rest?" I pressed. Mark's eyes got glossy. "I messed up. Okay?" I waited, silent, until the truth had nowhere else to go. He whispered, "I gambled." There it was. The thing that recontextualized Dad's note, the hidden documents, the missing taxes. The land wasn't a safety net. It was a cash machine, and Mark had been feeding himself from it until it ran dry. And Dad had let him, or helped him, or both. I went into problem-solving mode so hard it felt like dissociation. I took out a loan from my 401k. I hated myself for it, but the lien deadline didn't care about my feelings. We paid the county and redeemed the land. The attorney filed the paperwork. The lien holder backed off. For a brief window, it felt like I'd wrestled the future back into order. Mark even hugged me, awkwardly, like we were in a movie about brothers who find their way back. "I'll pay you back," he promised. "When the land deal comes through." I wanted to believe him. I wanted to feel like the steady one again, the adult, the person in control. The company interested in the mineral rights offered a settlement. A lump sum for the lease extension plus future royalties. Not life-changing money, but enough to refill what I'd pulled from retirement and still leave something to split. We signed preliminary agreements. I remember standing on the porch with Mark, the late summer air heavy with cut grass, and thinking, okay, crisis contained. That was the false resolution, the point where I let myself exhale, because the final unraveling hadn't even started. 2 weeks later, I got a call from the attorney. His voice sounded different, less tired, more careful. "There's an issue with the title," he said. "My dad owned this land for decades," I replied automatically. "What issue?" He cleared his throat. "There's an old deed from the 90s. It shows a partial transfer." "To who?" I asked, and even as I said it, dread crawled up my spine. "To Mark," he said, "and someone else." I drove to his office like my foot was on fire. He spread out copies of recorded documents. There, in faded ink, was a deed that transferred a portion of the acreage, specifically the section the mineral rights corridor crossed, into Mark's name and a second name I didn't recognize. A woman's name, not my mom's, not a spouse, just a woman. Mark's face, when I confronted him, was pure panic. "I don't know her," he said too fast. "I swear." But the deed said otherwise. It was recorded. It was real, which meant someone, Dad or Mark, had put that land in the hands of a stranger. And our settlement with the company wasn't just delayed. It was potentially dead. The fourth twist was realizing the stranger wasn't a stranger at all. I dug through Dad's old mail and found a Christmas card tucked behind a drawer. A smiling woman in front of a camper, sunburned and happy, with a note inside, "Thanks again for everything. Your family to us." Signed with the same name as the deed. I found more traces, an address, a P.O. box, a couple of old checks. Then I did the thing I hate doing. I checked social media. She was real. She lived 2 counties over. And she had photos with Mark. Not recent, older, but familiar enough that my chest went tight. Mark looked younger, but it was him, arm around her shoulder, grinning like he'd won something. When I confronted Mark with the photo on my phone, his mouth opened and closed. Finally, he sat down hard on the edge of the couch. "She was my friend," he said. "Friend," I repeated. Mark rubbed his eyes. "Dad introduced us." The room spun a little. "Why would Dad introduce you to someone who ends up on the deed?" Mark's voice dropped. "Because she was lending me money." I stared at him. "What?" Mark swallowed. "She had cash. Dad said she was safe. He said if I signed something, she'd front me money until the royalties came in. So Dad brokered a private loan using the land as collateral," I said slowly, each word tasting worse than the last. Mark started crying, angry tears. "He was trying to help me." "No." My brain corrected, cold and clear. Dad was trying to manage Mark. And he did it with the land. We contacted her. She didn't sound like a villain. That was the worst part. She sounded like someone who'd been burned before and learned to put everything in writing. "I didn't steal anything," she told me over speakerphone. "Your dad came to me. He said Mark needed a bridge. He said the land would cover it." "How much?" I asked. There was a pause. 80,000. Mark made a choking sound beside me. She continued, matter of fact. Mark stopped paying. Dad stopped answering. She filed what she could to protect herself. She had a lawyer. She had receipts. She had signed promissory notes. Promissory notes. In my dad's lockbox, I found them neatly folded, like secrets. Mark's signature. Dad's signature as a witness. And one more signature on a guarantee page. Mine. Not my handwriting. Not my normal slant. But close enough to make my skin crawl. The hospital memory came flooding back. Dad's stroke years ago. Me signing paperwork with shaking hands. Mark hovering. Dad's friend. Helping. I had been calm. Responsible. In control. And someone had used that reputation like a weapon. I wasn't just cleaning up a mess. I had been quietly drafted into it. The land deal fell apart, at least for now. The company won't finalize anything until the title is clean. And cleaning it means lawyers, court, and money we don't have. My 401k loan still exists. The tax lien is gone. But the private debt is sitting on the property like a weight. Mark keeps saying, "We can fix it." And I don't know if he means it or if it's just his favorite lullaby. I did something I never imagined I'd do. I filed a fraud report about the forged guarantee. I did it with my hands steady, my voice polite, like I was canceling a subscription. I watched Mark's face as I told him. He looked betrayed, which almost made me laugh. "I'm your brother," he said. "How can you do that? How can I do that?" I repeated. "Mark, I pulled money from my retirement to save land Dad lied about, because you were bleeding it dry, and now I find out someone signed my name to your private loans." Mark whispered, "Dad wouldn't." I cut him off. "Dad did, or he let it happen. Either way, he built this. That's the financial truth I can't unlearn." My dad's love wasn't free. It was transactional. It was protective in the way a cage is protective. He didn't just try to save Mark, he tried to control him with money, and he used me as the stable foundation he could pour concrete on without asking. And the ugliest part is what it shows about me. I thought being responsible made me untouchable. I thought calmness was armor. But it was also camouflage, something people could hide behind while they moved numbers and signatures around. The house is quiet now. The land is still there, stubborn and indifferent. Some mornings I walk the fence line and feel the frost crunch under my boots. And it hits me that the documents I found didn't just change Mark's fate. They changed mine. Not because they made me richer, because they proved I never had the control I thought I did.